Hi, Kirby's parents. I just wanted to go through and talk with you about the results that we found today when we were doing the test for his lactose intolerance. Whenever we ran the test to see if his body had the necessary enzymes to break down the lactose going into his system, we actually found that his body actually does really, really good, better than average at breaking down lactose in dairy, which means that he does not have lactose intolerance. Normally, whenever it comes to lactose intolerance, your body makes this enzyme called lactase, and it breaks down this lactose into different sugar molecules that your body can then process for basically creating energy. And normally, whenever you have lactose intolerance, your body struggles to break down this lactose into those different sugars. And if you're having problems, Kirby, he may feel like bloated or like pain, gas pains, things like that, because his body's having to push through that lactose without actually being able to break it down. The good news is for your son, he doesn't have that issue and he can actually have as much dairy as he wants. In fact, more than the average person, because his body does really good at breaking down this fast. And still, you want to make sure that you're regulating those levels, but it's good to know that he's able to break that down. And yeah, so anything like milk, cheese, yogurts, things like that, he should be able to eat in typical portions and be just fine. So lactose intolerance would not be the issue with some of the gut pains that you said he's been experiencing over the past little bit. All right, would Jamal's parents come on in? Hi. So, talk a little bit about the results that we saw for Jamal when going through his results. We found that his body is able to break down lactose, but it's actually happening at a little bit of a slower result than average. And so lactose intolerance is typically whenever your body is unable to break down lactose, and it has this enzyme called lactase that does this. And so for someone that has lactose intolerance, this means that their body is not breaking down this lactose, and then it's having to pass through the system, and it's not being able to be broken down to the sugars that our bodies can actually use. And so for your son, since he's breaking it down at a slower rate, it doesn't mean that he has to entirely avoid having different dairy products. It does mean, however, that he should have less than the normal person. And so the good news in that case for him is that there's plenty of options as to go forward and to be able to have things that necessarily don't have that lactose in it. For example, my wife actually has a little bit of lactose intolerance, and so instead of buying normal milk, we actually go and get almond milk for her, and she does that instead of having normal milk, and she's still able to have a lot of meals that normally have dairy in it with those different alternatives. And so because of that, there's plenty of options out there that avoid having direct milk. But the good news is for Jamal, he can still have it. It's just necessarily not like having it in as large quantities as those around him. So I would just make sure whenever you're planning out a diet for him, just make sure that you're being careful with how much dairy you're including, because if he's having too much, he could have these issues. But if he's having it in a lesser moderation, he should be okay. All right, would Lucy's parents mind coming in? Hi, I wanted to talk a little bit about the results that we found when we were doing tests for Lucy's ability to break down lactose. Whenever we tested her enzymes to see if she was able to break it down, we found that she actually is not able to break down any lactose. And so because of that, that means that she's lactose intolerant. So what does that mean? Normally, your body makes this enzyme called lactase, and lactase is what's used to break down that lactose into sugars that our bodies can use, glucose and galactose. And so for someone with lactose intolerance, that means that their body can have a lot of adverse reactions to it, and it won't be able to break down this lactose into these smaller sugars that can then be processed. And so you can feel bloated, you can feel pain, a lot of gas pain, those things can happen to someone who does have lactose intolerance, which may be the case for your daughter Lucy because she did test positive for having lactose intolerance with the enzyme results that we saw. And so those are some of the ways that your child may feel whenever she has this lactose intolerance. But the good news is that there is a lot of alternatives in terms of being able to work with lactose intolerance. Just because she can't have dairy doesn't mean that there's plenty of different alternatives to dairy within a diet. My wife, for example, actually does have a slight amount of lactose intolerance. And so we do a couple of things to make sure that she can't have dairy in her diet. And one of those things that we do is instead of buying whole milk or like 2% milk, which is what I normally drink for her, we actually go and buy things like almond milk, which gives an alternative for her to be able to have something that's dairy-esque, but not necessarily directly dairy, like straight from the cow. And so because of that, there's plenty of delicious, like, and nutritious dairy-free options to look around. There's plenty of resources online because there's a lot of people that suffer from this that you can check out to be able to help your child with her lactose intolerance. All right. And finally, patient XAEAXII, I'm going to call you 12 if you and your family want to come in. I ran the tests on your blood glucose or your lactose levels, and you are totally normal. And so that means that your body is making the lactase it needs to be able to break down the lactose into glucose and galactose, and you can have dairy in moderation. And so you can enjoy any dairy meals, you can enjoy a typical normal lifestyle, and be confident that the lactose that you're taking in is not what's causing any of your gut issues.